So this is a story about a family, a pill, and a lie. A lie that, as lies go, was an absolute blockbuster, worth billions and billions of dollars. This is the story of how one of America's wealthiest dynasties, the Sacklers, built a glittering empire on a foundation of human pain. They didn't just sell a drug, they sold a fairy tale. The fairy tale of a life without pain, and this is the crucial part, virtually no risk. But while their fortune bloomed, a national catastrophe quietly unfolded. And let's be clear, this was not a tragic accident. It was a masterpiece of marketing, a deliberate, cynical strategy that unleashed a plague of addiction and death across a nation. And when the world finally started to notice the bodies piling up, they tried to wash the blood from their hands with philanthropy and hide their billions behind a fortress of lawyers. I'm Andy Roberts, and this is The Fine Print. This is how the Sacklers engineered an addiction crisis. To understand the opioid crisis, you have to understand the family that lit the fuse, the Sacklers. The saga begins with three brothers, all doctors: Arthur, Mortimer, and Raymond. Arthur, the eldest, wasn't just a doctor, he was a marketing visionary, or depending on your perspective, a marketing zealot. In the 50s and 60s, he completely revolutionized how drugs were sold. His masterstroke: stop advertising to patients and instead target the people with the prescription pads. He turned drugs like Valium into household names and made a fortune doing it. Arthur's guiding philosophy was beautifully simple. The biggest barrier to a drug's success wasn't its chemical formula, but the pesky, neurotic fears of doctors and patients about, side effects and getting addicted. This philosophy would become the sacred playbook for his brother's company, a little outfit called Purdue Pharma. After Arthur's death, his brothers Mortimer and Raymond took over and set their sights on a massive untapped market: everyday chronic non-cancer pain. For decades, doctors had been quite reasonably reluctant to prescribe strong opioids for things like backaches or arthritis because they are, famously highly addictive. The Sacklers and Purdue didn't see this as a medical fact. They saw it as a marketing problem. Their solution arrived in 1996, a small, unassuming pill called OxyContin. The active ingredient, oxycodone, was nothing new. It was an old, potent opioid. The breakthrough, Purdue claimed, was its patented time-release formula. The pill was designed to dissolve slowly, giving 12 hours of pain relief. And here it is, the cornerstone of the entire enterprise, the lie that would be worth billions. Purdue claimed this slow-release magic trick made OxyContin fundamentally different. They launched a marketing tidal wave, asserting with little to no credible long-term evidence that the risk of addiction was less than 1%. It was a number that would soon be everywhere, in medical journals, on glossy pamphlets, in promotional videos. A number chanted by an army of sales reps in doctors' offices across the country. A number that was pure fiction. Armed with their miracle drug and their magic number, Purdue Pharma unleashed what has been called the most aggressive marketing campaign for a narcotic in history. They weren't just selling a product, they were on a mission to change the entire culture of how American medicine treated pain. First, they built a huge sales force, doubling it to over 600 reps by the year 2000. These weren't your average reps, mind. No. They were armed with a database that pinpointed the highest prescribing doctors in any given area, specifically targeting general practitioners who often knew the least about addictive medicine. And the incentives. Whew. The more OxyContin a rep's doctor prescribed, and the higher the doses, the bigger their bonuses. Some reps were pulling in thousands of thousands a year in bonuses alone. When doctors reasonably raised concerns that their patients seemed to be getting a little bit, hooked, running out of pills early and begging for higher doses, Purdue had a wonderfully clinically sounding term for that: pseudo-addiction. It was a concept they pushed hard, arguing that this behavior wasn't a sign of addiction at all, but proof that the patient's pain was being undertreated. The solution, they insisted, wasn't less OxyContin, but more. The campaign was an all-out assault. Purdue poured hundreds of millions into an influence machine. They flew doctors out to all-expenses-paid pain management seminars at swanky resorts in Florida and Arizona. And what a surprise! Doctors who attended wrote more than double the number of new OxyContin prescriptions. They funded medical literature and patient advocacy groups, all hammering home the same message. Pain is undertreated and OxyContin is the safe solution. They even gave out branded swag, OxyContin fishing hats, coffee mugs, and swing music CDs called Get in the Swing with Swing. You can't make this stuff up. And this wasn't all some rogue operation. No, the orders came from the very top. Richard Sackler, son of the co-founder, Raymond, was calling the shots. He famously urged his team to create a blizzard of prescriptions that will bury the competition. And later, as reports of abuse started to pour in, his response wasn't concern for public health, it was an infamous email where he suggested they hammer on the abusers in every way possible, calling them the culprits and the problem. To the Sacklers, the people getting addicted to their addictive product weren't victims, they were a public relation nuisance, an obstacle to their profits.
Shame on Sackler! Shame on Sackler! Shame on Sackler!
So how does a company get away with marketing a highly addictive narcotic like it's Tylenol? Well, the answer lies not just with Purdue, but with the spectacular failure of the very system meant to protect us. The public's supposed watchdog, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, basically held the gates wide open. So that whole 1% addiction claim, the whole linchpin of the operation, was based on the flimsiest of evidence, including a 5-sentence letter to the editor in a medical journal. It wasn't a study, it was basically a glorified comment section, yet the FDA allowed Purdue to put a version of this claim right on OxyContin's official label, giving it the golden stamp of government approval. And the FDA examiner who oversaw the approvals, a Dr. Curtis Wright, left the agency not long after. About 2 years later, he landed a cushy, high-paying job at Purdue Pharma. Funny how that works. This revolving door between regulators and the industries they are meant to police isn't new, but here the consequences were catastrophic. Even the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, raised the alarm, but their requests for stricter controls were shot down. Purdue knew, and they knew early on, that their drug was being abused. Internal reports show that the pills were easily crushed to bypass the time release, allowing users to snort or inject them for a heroin-like high. They had evidence of widespread abuse just 1 year after launch. Yet for years, they kept telling the world it was safe, and that the problem wasn't the drug, it was the abusers. In 2007, Purdue and 3 of its executives did plead guilty to criminal charges of misbranding. They admitted they misled people, but it was, to put it mildly, a slap on the wrist. The company paid a $600 million fine, a pittance compared to their profits, and the executives got off with misdemeanors. No jail time, no personal admission of guilt, and for the Sackler family members who orchestrated the whole thing and pocketed the literal billions, not a single charge. It was just the cost of doing business, and business was good. The marketing blitz worked better than Purdue could ever have imagined. OxyContin sales exploded from 48 million in its first year to nearly 3 billion by 2002. The Sacklers became unearthly wealthy, but as their fortunes skyrocketed, so did the body count. The blizzard of prescriptions that Richard Sackler wanted became a blizzard of addiction. Across America, especially in struggling towns, pill mills popped up where shady doctors churned out prescriptions for cash. People with real injuries found themselves trapped in a chemical prison they never saw coming. One young man prescribed OxyContin for a dirt bike accident was hooked in 2 weeks, sending him down a spiral of addiction and crime. His story was repeated hundreds of thousands of times. The United States, with just 5% of the world's population, was soon wolfing down over 80% of the world's opioids. The fire that Purdue and the Sacklers lit was now a raging inferno. From 1999 to today, over 500,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses. So many of those deaths began with a perfectly legal prescription. And when the pills got too expensive, a desperate generation turned to cheaper street drugs like heroin and later fentanyl. The OxyContin crisis had seeded a heroin crisis, which then became a fentanyl crisis. Journalists and whistleblowers tried desperately to sound the alarm, but they were shouting into the wind against a corporate giant with an army of lawyers. For years, the story Purdue sold was one that stuck. This wasn't their fault. It was the problem of irresponsible junkies. As the body count from their blockbuster drug climbed, the Sacklers embarked on a different kind of campaign. A campaign to launder their name. They started donating absolutely staggering sums of money to the world's most prestigious museums and universities. Suddenly, the Sackler name was carved into the stone walls of the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Louvre. There was a Sackler Museum at Harvard, a Sackler Institute at Columbia, a Sackler Courtyard at the V&A in London. They became synonymous with high culture and intellectualism. It was a brilliant strategy, now commonly known as art washing. Every new gallery wing that bore their name helped distance the family from the source of their grotesque wealth. It created a powerful dissonance. How could a family responsible for so much death also be such pillars of society? It brought them silence. It bought them legitimacy. For years, these revered institutions were more than happy to cash the checks and look the other way. But thanks to the relentless work of activists like the photographer Nan Goldin, herself a former OxyContin addict, the truth became impossible to ignore. Her group, PAIN, P-A-I-N, staged dramatic die-ins at museums, scattering pill bottles in the very halls the Sacklers had built. They forced the art world to confront the ugly reality behind the beautiful facade. One by one, under immense public pressure, the dominoes fell. The Met, the Guggenheim, the Tate, the Louvre, they all eventually scrubbed the Sackler name from their walls. A public disavowal of a name that had become toxic. By the late 2010s, the legal walls were now closing in. The Sacklers and Purdue were facing over 3,000 lawsuits from states, cities, and tribes across the country. Their carefully constructed reputation was in flames. So they hatched an escape plan. First, for years, the family had been systematically siphoning billions of dollars, more than $10 billion out of Purdue Pharma, funneling it into a complex web of private trusts and offshore accounts. They were stripping the company for parts, making sure their personal fortune was well out of reach. Then, in September 2019, Purdue played its trump card. It filed for bankruptcy. Now, this wasn't your typical, ooh, we're broke bankruptcy. It was a cynical legal maneuver designed to halt every single lawsuit against it. And at the heart of their proposed settlement was an absolutely audacious demand. In exchange for paying into a settlement fund, the Sackler family themselves, who were not bankrupt, would receive a sweeping lifetime grant of immunity from all current and future civil lawsuits over the opioid crisis. They were trying to use their company's bankruptcy to buy a get-out-of-jail-free card for themselves. The legal battle raged for years. Finally, a stunning decision in June 2024. The US Supreme Court blocked the deal, refusing to grant the Sacklers their precious legal shield. The fight continues. A new settlement was announced in principle in early 2025, with the family agreeing to pay up to $7.4 billion. But even that staggering sum must be seen in context. It would be paid out over years, and it's a fraction of the hundreds of billions in damages sought by plaintiffs. To this day, not a single member of the Sackler family has faced a single criminal charge for their role in this catastrophe. Their fortune, while slightly dented, remains largely intact. The story of the Sackler family is a sickening masterclass in how corporate greed can torch public health, and how our own legal and regulatory systems fail so spectacularly. It's a complex mess, and a shining light on it is the first step towards demanding any kind of real accountability. If you found this useful, share it. More people need to understand the architecture of this crisis. A family of billionaires engineered a public health catastrophe, profited from it for decades, and then tried to use that fortune to buy their way out of the consequences. They've never truly said sorry. They've never faced a jury. The story of the Sacklers isn't just about one company. It's a cautionary tale about the illusion of accountability in modern America, and a testament to the enduring, devastating legacy of an empire built on pain. They made billions, flooding the streets with drugs, and then walked away with clean hands while the country drowned in addiction. If you thought this was bad, wait until you hear what Johnson & Johnson did. A company known for baby powder somehow managed to cause cancer, lie about it for decades, and then tried to dodge responsibility by playing the same financial gymnastics. Click here to watch that story. It is a masterclass in corporate denial. And hey, if this video opened your eyes, give it a like, drop a comment, and maybe even hit that subscribe button. I'm Andy Roberts, and I tell stories like this so fewer of them happen again. I'll see you in the next one.